Okay, so in this tutorial I'm going to cover how to generate the general orthographic drawings for project 2. This tutorial is going to be in several parts that will walk you through how to generate all of the drawings due as part of this assignment. And we're going to start with the shop drawings. I'm going to go onto D2L, Contents, Assignments, and Project 2. I'm going to just click the little pop out so I can keep this open. Okay, and then the first thing I want you to pay attention to is the shop drawing set of the list of drawings here. So these are the individual drawings that we're going to need to generate as part of the shop drawing. Again, this is for part A of the assignment, project 2. So what I want to do is first start by also paying attention to which frame I have, which material I'm building my frame out of. So again, if you had a steel seat, you're going to draw the wood frame, and if you had a wood seat, you're going to draw the steel frame. Okay, so I'm going to go into Rhino, and first I want to draw the plan, section, and elevation. And I'm going to show you guys how to kind of set up the file. So I'm going to first go into top view, expand that view. Always before I do anything else, I want to change my units. So I'm down here, again, I'm in millimeters. I'll type in units, change to inches. And while I'm here, I also want to go to layout and change my layout units also into inches. Okay, and we'll use that later. And because what I'm doing first is I'm going to actually draw, like in 2D, I'm going to draft these drawings. Before I start drawing, I'm actually going to generate all the layers that I'll need to produce my line weights. So over here in the layers panel, and if you don't have the layers panel open, you can open it by clicking down here where it says the layer you're on, and I'll click new layer. I'm going to make a few different layers: heavy, medium, light, super light. I'm also going to make a layer called hatch. So some of our drawings we're gonna poche with a specific hatch in order to indicate what material is what. So there's a layer called hatch. I'm going to make a layer called DIM or dim. That stands for dimensions. So any text we use or dimensions we add to our drawings will go on that layer. And finally, I want to make one called dash. Okay. And before I do anything else, I also want to modify the properties of these layers so that they're easy to work with. So first of all, I want to change the color of all of them to a unique color. And the color I'm talking about here is the square, where you see they're all black right now. So I'm going to click on that square, and I'll just make all of these, some different color so that they're easy to identify. You can choose whichever ones are most clear to you. Okay. So now when we are switching between layers and drawing with different layers, we can easily visually tell which layer we're on and what layer different lines are on. The next thing I want to do is change the line type just for my dash layer. So again, that layer is going to be for making dash lines. So if I click under line type where it says continuous, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to dashed. So that will show up as a dash line anytime I draw a line on that layer. And finally, I'm going to change the print color of each one of these to black. So the print color is the little diamond shape. I'm going to change them to black. I can actually do them all really quickly by selecting them all and then changing them to black. And on super light, I'm just going to turn that one down to dark gray, just so it's a little easier to keep it lighter. And then under print width, I want to actually define, a series of different widths to create my actual line weight. So under heavy, I'm going to change that one to 0.9. Medium, I'll change to 0.5. Light, 0.35. Super light, 0.13. Etch, 1.8. Dimension, 1.8. And dash 1.8. Okay, so now we have a good set of layers set up. We have our file in the right units. The next step is to actually draft the projections. Okay, so now that we have our file set up and all of our layers set up the right way, I'm going to show you how to generate the first set of general orthographics from for the wood frame. So if you go to your assignment sheet and scroll down to the wood frame page, you can see that this drawing will show you the general dimensions of the frame, as well as give you some indication of the all the materials and what the dimensions are of the individual members and so on. Okay, so I'm going to start again, and if I look at my list here of drawings under shop drawing, I'm going to start by drawing my plan section and 2 elevations. So what I want to do first is make a construction line. I'm going to draw all my construction lines on the layer super light. I'll just start by drawing a rectangle. Click somewhere, and then again, if we look at the dimensions on the assignment sheet, our stool is 12 by 12. So I'll type in 12, enter, 12, enter. Okay, so that just gives us a starting point to indicate the outer dimensions of the stool. What I want to do next is draw the diagonal lines that represent the horizontal members that we would be looking at if we were looking at this in plan. So I'm going to go ahead and change my current layer to medium, and I will draw a line bisecting from corner to corner, and then again also in the other corner. Okay, so those are the center lines that mark where these horizontal members will go. And now what I want to do is create some new lines that show how thick those lines would be. So I'll select my center line, type in offset. Now if we look at the detail drawing, we can see that the overall dimension of each of those members is 1 1/4 or 1.25 inches. What I want to do is offset a line on either side of my center line by half of that dimension. So first of all, I'll click up here where it says both sides. So now you can see that I'm offsetting a line in both directions. And then I'll click where it says distance and type in 5 divided by 8 or 5/8, which is half of 1 1/4. Click anywhere, and then we can see I've generated 2 new lines that should be at the right width to represent that member. I'll do the same on the other line, offset. I can click on B on both sides, or I can just type B, enter in the keyboard. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete my center lines. Now, it may not be super clear from this drawing, but the outside dimensions represents the outside edge of that horizontal member. So this edge right here and that edge right there. So what we need to do now is actually we can just take the original rectangle that we drew, type in trim. So select that rectangle, type trim, and then just delete. or trim those excess lines. Then I would go ahead and draw a line at the end of each one of these to kind of cap it off. Okay, and the next part will be to actually determine, or to begin the process of determining how the joints are going to go. So what you can see is, if we look at, again, this axonometric, all of the joints in this stool are formed by what's called a lap joint. What a lap joint is, you can see a lot of different diagrams, but basically you cut the parts of the material that are meant to join, and you remove, a surface that is half the dimension of the joint, so that they can form a kind of seamless connection, and it makes your joint a lot stronger. Actually, this image represents what will happen right there in the center. Those two are both sets of horizontal members will have a lap joint where they kind of run through each other in the middle. Okay, and in order to draw this on here, what I'm going to do is just draw a couple of lines. So I'll get a polyline. I'll start drawing from the midpoint. Now you should be able to draw out at 45 degrees by just snapping to the to your ortho. I'm going to type in 1.25 and press enter. So that's the depth of one of these lap joints. Now I could take that line and type in copy to the other side. And what I also want to do is choose which one of these horizontal members is going to be on the top. So let's say, for instance, I choose this one, right? So let's go ahead and just trim that right away. So I'll select these two lines, and I'll trim the other two lines. So now we know that this member is going to go over that member when the lap joint gets formed. And then I also just need to choose which side I want the lap joint to be on over here. Again, I'll just draw a line. Okay. So what that means is I'm going to use this member to kind of determine how every other joint will go. So whatever you choose here, we can use that as a reference to draw all the rest of the joints. And what I mean by that is, if we look at our stool design, if we're careful about how we choose the placement of what side each joint is cut on, we can actually get away with only making two different parts. What that means is we can design the stool so that the way that we would cut this part out when we're fabricating is exactly the same as how we would cut this part out. And that's really good because it's going to make it a lot easier for us to keep track of what cuts do we need to make and where they need to be located on the pieces, and just avoid making mistakes while we're fabricating. So what we want to do is, I'm going to go ahead and select this line right now, just to demonstrate how to use this one as a template. I'm actually going to make a copy of it. So I'll select just that line, move it away. Now, just so we can kind of imagine how this rotation would work. All right, so if I had this member, and I were to have the same member or the same set of cuts on the horizontal member that goes the other way, what I would have is I would have a part that's rotated 90 degrees, and it would be flipped, right? So because the joint in the middle is facing down, on this member it's facing up. So if we were to take this member, rotate it, and flip it, in this case I'll just type in mirror. I can turn off the option to copy, and then mirror it along its length. You can see that is where we would want our joints to go, or that's the orientation that we want our joints to be in. So I can actually go ahead and take these curves, use the command move, and just move them over so that they're showing my joints in my plan. Okay, so hopefully that part is clear. I'm also going to go in here now and change these lines to another layer because I think they should be a lighter line weight. So I'll select those interior curves that just show how the joint works, and right click on my light layer and go to change object layer. Okay. Now the next step will be to draw my two elevations. Before I get started with that, I'm just going to draw a couple of construction lines. So I'll set my super light layer to current, draw a line, just draw it down. Doesn't matter too much the length. And I can actually copy this line just so I'm a little more consistent. Now I want to make a construction line that's going to show me where I need to draw every edge in this case. So I want to go ahead and make a construction line for that edge of the joint. I already have one for the outside edge, and then for that inside edge. So I'll copy it to those 2 points. Okay. And that's going to be the kind of template for our for drawing our verticals in our elevation. And I also want to go ahead and draw a horizontal line, so I'll just type in line. I'm going to click anywhere, hold Shift, and this is going to define the top of our stool. Again, if we look at the dimensions on the assignment sheet, the stool is 18 inches tall, so I can draw a horizontal line there and just type in offset, distance 18, type in 18, and then click below. Okay, and that will use those two lines to determine the height of the stool as we draw it. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and actually, before I'm done, I'm also going to offset these construction lines. Offset by 1.25. That's the depth of our horizontal members. So the top one I want to offset down, the bottom one I want to offset upward. Again, because that's those are the outside dimensions. So everything we draw will be, towards the inside of the overall dimensions. Okay, then I'm going to change it back to my layer medium, and I'm going to lock my layer super light, just so that as I'm drawing it will draw the lines over that layer, and I can still clearly see what I'm doing. So I'll type in line, and I'm going to draw a line from, I guess I could start by just drawing all the outside edges. So I'm just tracing my construction lines. Okay. And then in here where I draw my actual joint, I want to think about what I would be seeing if I were looking, like at the side of my stool. I would see that edge, and I would see that edge. And because we're actually looking at this side of the joint, meaning this member, this vertical member that forms this joint, would actually be a continuous line from the very top to the very bottom. So again, I'll select line. I'm going to trace that edge. Same thing on this side, I'll trace that edge. Okay. And then I want to trace the outside of that vertical member as well. So I'll trace that middle line. Okay. And then I would draw the rest of my lines for my horizontal members. So I could just draw a line straight across. And we kind of have the rough outlines of all of the members defined. So now what I want to do is go in and actually draw the lines that show how my joints work and show where there are edges or folds between materials. So I would go ahead and switch to the layer light. I'm going to draw a line right from midpoint to midpoint on both of the horizontals, because that represents where there's this connection between the horizontal members. And then with the joint, I would actually go ahead and draw a line on the midpoint of this face, so I could use the endpoint up there. If I get it to lock with my smart track, draw from there to there. Okay, and if we were looking at the side of that joint, we would see a line there and a line there, right? So I would also draw a line from here to the outside edge. And I'll do the same thing on this one. Oops. Wait till it turns gray. And then draw that line. Okay, and on the bottom, we want to draw the mirror image of those two lines. So I could actually select those, type in mirror, use the center of my upright. Okay, oops. And make sure you have the option copy set to yes when you do that. So snap to the midpoint and hold shift. Okay. Okay, so that should pretty clearly illustrate how those edges look. Now, as I talked about a little bit in the drawing up here in the plan, it's actually going to make the most sense for us to show all the joints and how they work in both elevations. So what I'm going to do in order to understand how it would work in the next elevation, and I'll unlock my layer Superlight. I'm going to just select my plan and make a copy of it. So I'll hit copy, or type in copy, just click anywhere and hold shift, move it over like that, and then I'm also going to rotate this. So in this plan, you know, we're looking at the stool from the front. Now we want to know, what does it look like if we look at it from the side? So if I just rotate this 90 degrees, then I can kind of use it for construction lines to show from the other side. Now I need to get my center point. I can use the rectangle as the center point and get the center point snap to the center from that. Or if I have Smart Track turned on, I can make a Smart Track point at the outside midpoints. Again, just snap to that midpoint, wait till it turns gray. Okay, and then Smart Track will find the intersection. I'll hold shift, rotate it 90 degrees. Okay, and then we can use this to define how we'll show the joints on the next elevation. I'm going to go ahead and go back to medium. I'm also going to go ahead and lock my light layer. And then I'm going to go ahead and copy this whole drawing. Oh, I'm sorry, I will uncheck the light, or unpreview the light layer. And I want to copy all the green lines because those are our base lines. Okay, so I'll type in copy, snap to the outside corner, and then over here, if I hit tab on my keyboard, that will actually, while I'm dragging it out straight, that will actually lock me into moving something in one direction. So if I hold shift and hit tab, now you can see wherever I put my mouse, I'm always moving in one direction. So what that means is now that I'm moving straight left and right, I can just snap to the outside corner of my other plan to line those two drawings up with each other. Okay, now I'm going to turn the layer light back on so I can see my joints. And once again, I want to use the plan to show where the joints would go. First of all, I need to draw a line midpoint to midpoint on my horizontals. Then on this joint, we're actually looking at the back side of the horizontal member. So what we would really be seeing is we would see a line that comes down on that face and then goes across this way. That's the opposite of what we had on the other side. And on this side, we would actually do the same, I think, as what we saw on the other side. You can also hit Control on the keyboard if sometimes that Smart Track point won't work. Okay. Okay. So now we've drawn those two joints, and I can select those lines and type mirror, hold shift. Okay, last thing to do is this part right here isn't quite right. So because the lap joint is coming in and covering that vertical member from a horizontal, we actually shouldn't be seeing this line, we should be seeing a line right there. And that will make it more clear. So first I'm going to select this line and type in, or I'm sorry, select the inside of the two horizontals, type in trim. Just trim those excess edges. Okay, and then draw a line. So use the line tool, set my layer to medium, and just continue that horizontal line across. And there we go. Now we're showing how the order of that joint would work in this elevation. Now, finally, what we want to do is actually draw our seat. So I could go ahead and delete this before I move on as well. Okay, finally what we want to do is draw our seat. Now, again, if you look at the assignment, seat is 15 by 15. So I could use this original rectangle that I drew at 12 by 12 and offset it. If I offset it by 1.5 inches in all directions, I should end up with a seat that's 15 by 15. Now in my plan, what I actually want to do is draw this thing using a dashed line. So I could select that line that I just offset, change it to the layer dashed, change object layer, because what I really want in this drawing set is to see the frame. And while we do need to look at the seat in order to understand the relationship of the seat to the frame, obviously the seat is centered on the frame. What we actually want to do is make sure that we're not hiding the frame by drawing the seat. So if I set that to a dashed line, then it's like we're looking through the seat and at the frame. So we can still understand the frame, but we can see how the seat is situated relative to that frame. Okay, and then I want to go ahead and draw that same seat in my elevations. So I could go down here and draw. I can either go back to my original write-o file where I drew the profile of my seat, or I could just redraw it. So I'm going to draw a line. I want to draw it from the midpoint of my stool. I'm going to choose the option. If I use the command line, I can choose this option both sides. Sorry, if I choose the command line instead of polyline, I can use this option both sides. I'm going to draw it from the midpoint of my elevation, and I'll just draw my line up so that I can kind of see what's going on better. Now I'm going to type in 3. So 3 in both directions makes a 6-foot straight line. Hold shift to snap to ortho. Okay, so now I've drawn the flat part of the seat. Then I could go in here, draw an arc, choose the option tangent, snap to that line, enter the radius. So I'm going to type in 18. Drag my cursor over so that I'm joining that line right at the outside edge. Click, and then click one more time to draw the curve that way, not the other way. Okay. And then I could quickly draw a line from here just to trim it off at 15 inches. And then I will mirror that line. Okay, so there's the profile of our seat. I can join those lines together, and I will move them down so that they're sitting right on my stool. And then finally, I also want to go ahead and offset to show the thickness. Again, if you have a wood frame, you're looking at a steel seat, and a 16 gauge piece of sheet metal is around a 1/16 of an inch. So type in 1 divided by 16 and press enter, click. Okay, and then we'll just draw some lines to join the ends. type in join. Okay, so there's our seat. Now on this side, or on this elevation, we can also use our seat to, or the seat we drew in this elevation, we can make some construction lines with it. So I'll snap to those two lines. And we already have the bottom. Okay. Now if I hit rectangle, I'm going to change my layer back to medium. I want to go ahead and draw it from the midpoint. Oops, I'm sorry. Choose the option center, draw it from the midpoint, and just type in 15. Okay. And then we can snap to our construction lines. Oops, it's actually bigger than I wanted it to be. Okay, so I could select that curve and move the endpoints up until they hit my construction lines. Okay, so now I'm looking at that outside edge of my seat. And then the next thing I want to do is draw the other edge of my seat. So I'm going to switch my layer to light, type in or hit the command Polyline, draw straight down from the outside corners, and use that to draw the rest of the seat. Okay, so that's the two elevations. And then finally, I also want to use this drawing to illustrate, or I want to use my seat drawing to illustrate my section. Now to draw the section, I'm gonna make first I want to make a section marker. I'm going to click on the layer, set my current layer to dimension, because that's what we're going to use to kind of like, you know, add symbols and dimensions and text and stuff. In this case, we want to draw a section marker. So I'm going to go to the Polyline tool. Now, what I don't want to do is draw right through the middle, draw my section right through the middle of my stool, because that's just going to look confusing. What I want from this section is to show kind of how the seat is joined to the stool. So I'm going to cut through like right here, so that we can see kind of somewhere in the middle of those horizontal members. And then we can also see how the seat comes down and joins those horizontal members. I'm going to start just clicking somewhere out here where I want that section to go. Then I can draw a line out at some dimension. So that part of the line indicates where the section will be cut. And then I want to draw another little line at 90 degrees indicating which way we're looking with that section. So if I'm cutting through my stool right there and looking in this direction, I want to draw a line, a little L-shaped line, pointing in that direction. And I can make a copy of this to the other side by typing in mirror. There we go, mirror about the midpoint. And then, you know, later when I go and label my drawings, I can use these indications to show where I cut my section. Now I'm also going to, at this point, I'm gonna lock the layer super light, and I'm gonna move these drawings over and just draw my new section right here. So I'm gonna select all these drawings, and I'll type in move, and then I'll snap to this corner, and then snap that drawing to the same corner where the other elevation used to be. And that way we know that when we draw this section, we'll have like a even spacing between our three drawings, just to kind of keep our layout cleaner. Okay. Now I'm going to go back to the layer super light. I could draw a line from the ends of my section markers across to see where that kind of intersects with my plan. And then I will draw some construction lines down from that intersection. Oops, draw it all the way down. So snap to the intersection between the construction line and the plan. Draw all the way down. Okay. And then that will tell me, so if I were to cut through my stool right there, I would see a big flat wood face right there. So that will tell me that that's where I want to draw my section cut. Now again, because this is actually the section cut line, I'm actually going to use the layer heavy, and I will use the command rectangle to draw those outlines. Again, if I lock the layer construction lines are on, I can more easily see what I'm doing on top of that. I could change to medium. Oops. Draw a line between my two cuts, and then change to light and draw the draw a line between the midpoints to show that little edge between the two horizontal members. Okay, and then I'll select all those lines, type in copy, and copy them down to the bottom. They should be the same at the bottom. Okay, and then we also at this point would need to draw what this joint looks like. Because we're cutting through right here and looking that way, that means we can also see the joints that are behind, or the joints that form the back legs of the stool. So we also need to draw those lines. I'm going to go back to the layer medium. So I'll start by drawing the outside edge. Type in line. Okay, and then because we're looking at the joint this side, we would see that edge right there. That's where that member would join the horizontal. So we would see that line. Should be the same as this construction line or this construction line. So we would also draw that through the whole length, very top to very bottom. And then we would see, we'd basically just see our horizontal member come in, and we would see that corner join with the stool. The next thing I'll draw those horizontal lines. I'll draw one from the top to the very outside, another from the bottom to the inside, just like that. Okay. And we would also be looking at the inside face. Maybe it's easier if you look at this stool or this drawing. We would also be looking at that edge, right, of the inside face of each of those vertical members, which also, we can use that construction line to show where that edge would be. So again, I'll draw a line from the top to the bottom on the inside of our horizontals. And then finally, we would also want to add the seat to this drawing. I could go over to where my seat is, just type in copy, snap to the midpoint, copy to the midpoint. And then we would also, in this drawing, we would be looking at, we'd be cutting through the seat as well in this drawing. So I would go ahead and change that to the layer heavy, so that we see that as a heavier line weight. Okay, and I think that pretty much concludes drawing the plan section and elevation for the wood stool. And in the next tutorials, I'll show you how to draw the rest of the drawings.